The final push. Election Day is 2 days away. We'll have some final insights on the big races in Texas, from the presidential contest to U.S. Senate, Congress, and down the ballot. Evaluating the early voting numbers, how the turnout so far in this election compares to the 2020 presidential election, and the Texas state of mind. We're listening to Texans across the state about their thoughts on this election. Good Sunday morning to you. I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. A special live edition of Eye on Politics starts right now. Good morning. Hope you're having a nice weekend and that you enjoyed an extra hour of sleep. I sure did. This is a special live edition of Eye on Politics because we're 2 days away from Election Day. And aside from the presidential election, the biggest race in Texas is for U.S. Senate. And Democratic Congressman Colin Allred of Dallas is challenging Republican incumbent Ted Cruz, who is seeking a third 6-year term. In the past week, Allred has been getting out the vote in Houston, the Rio Grande Valley, and the Dallas-Fort Worth area, including a stop in Dallas with former Tarrant County Judge Glenn Whitley, a Republican, and former Dallas mayors Mike Rawlings and Ron Kirk, who are Democrats, and several business owners as well. They all touted Allred's effort to work across the political aisle and said the state's near-abortion ban is hurting efforts by businesses to attract talent to move to Texas. His campaign also released videos showing former President Barack Obama and former President Bill Clinton endorsing Allred. Back at the Dallas event, I asked Allred about his final message to voters. We've heard reproductive rights framed in a different way during this discussion today, as far as business, et cetera. And I'm wondering, how does that fit into your closing argument? Because you've certainly emphasized this issue very much in your campaign, when the polls have consistently showed border security and inflation in the economy are the top concerns among Texans.
Well, listen, if you want to talk about the economy, this is part of the economy. And this is to me, for us to thrive, we have to have certain conditions in place. One of those is fundamental freedoms. And in this case, we've had a fundamental freedom taken away. And we're seeing the consequences. And they are individual consequences, but they're also collective. And for us as Texans, we have to talk about how this election has so much riding on it, including our economic future, and whether or not that's going to be limited by the extremism that Ted Cruz has pushed. He is uniquely responsible for this abortion ban. He also does not support the investments that we've made in our state that have been good for our economy. Much of what we're doing right here in Texas is in spite of him. We don't have to have a senator that you're overcoming to get things done. You can have one who actually...
For his part, Senator Cruz has continued his 53-stop bus tour. During the past week, he's held events in the DFW area, including Plano on Friday morning, Weatherford, and Fort Worth. He's also campaigned in Conroe, north of Houston, Georgetown, and Colin in central Texas. Cruz also attended an event by former President Donald Trump in Austin more than a week ago, where Trump endorsed him. At the time, Allred was about to campaign with Vice President Kamala Harris in Houston, and Cruz told me how he believed the campaigns are wrapping up. You know what's happening today. Kamala Harris is here, and Colin Allred is actually going to be there with her. And so I'm wondering, what's your thought about that and your level of concern about them going all in on the abortion issue?
Yeah, look, I think it's fantastic. When I saw the announcement that Colin Allred is going to appear with Kamala Harris in Houston today, that they are embracing and they're running as one ticket. I actually retweeted it on X. I said, I'm Ted Cruz and I approve this message. You want the very simple contrast? You got the contrast. If you like Kamala Harris's open borders, if you like Kamala Harris's inflation, if you like Kamala Harris's letting criminals out of jail and the crime that comes with it, then Colin Allred is your man, because Colin Allred is Kamala Harris. On the other hand, if you like the prosperity, the peace and prosperity we had when Donald Trump was president, when we had a Republican Senate, Republican House, then I would ask for your vote, because that's the record we produced before. We did it before. We're going to do it again. I couldn't ask for a better summation of this campaign than Allred and Harris arm in arm at the same time that President Trump and I are standing together. That's the clear choice Texans have. It's the choice Americans have.
So let's talk about a couple of the big issues at the forefront of their campaigns, and the candidates are far apart. When it comes to border security, Allred backed the bipartisan bill that was developed in the Senate that increased restrictions on the asylum laws and boosted the number of agents and technology along the border. Allred has also opposed new border wall construction. Cruz backs restoring the Remain in Mexico policy for those applying for asylum that was started during the Trump administration. Cruz opposed the bipartisan bill developed in the Senate, saying it was weak and that he favors a House border bill that includes building more border wall. On the issue of abortion or reproductive rights, Allred favors codifying Roe v. Wade protections nationwide into federal law. Cruz favors leaving this issue up to each state to decide for itself. Republican Senator John Cornyn, the state's senior senator, is predicting victories for Senator Cruz and former President Donald Trump. He recently spoke with reporters in Dallas.
Obviously, these races have gotten much more competitive. There's a lot of money pouring into the state, as we can all attest to from the carpet bombing of ads, pro and con, each of the individual candidates. But I'm confident not only that President Trump will win in Texas, I think he's going to win re-election to the White House, but also I'm confident that Senator Cruz will win. I'm doing everything I can to help him.
And one North Texas county we will be watching closely on election night is Tarrant County, the largest Republican-led county in not only Texas, but the United States. In 2018, while Senator Cruz won the state by nearly 215,000 votes, he lost in Tarrant County to then Democratic candidate Beto O'Rourke by more than 4,300 votes. In 2020, while President Trump won Texas by more than 630,000 votes, he lost in Tarrant County to Joe Biden by more than 1,800 votes. Now to our final look before the election at the all-important 7 battleground states where the presidential race will be won. The Real Clear Politics average of polls shows razor-thin margins. In Arizona, former President Donald Trump leads Vice President Kamala Harris now by 2.3 percentage points, which is higher than last week. In Nevada, Trump is ahead of Harris by 0.9 percentage points. In Georgia, the former president leads by 2.6 percentage points, which is also higher than last week. But now to the Midwest, where Vice President Kamala Harris has retaken a slight lead in 2 states from last week. In Wisconsin, she's ahead by 0.3 percentage points. In Michigan, she's leading by 0.8 percentage points. In Pennsylvania, the biggest of the swing states, Trump leads by 0.3 percentage points, while he leads by 1.4 percentage points in North Carolina. Back to the U.S. Senate race, I got some final thoughts from 2 of our analysts, former Democratic State Representative Lorraine Birabil of Dallas and former Republican Texas Railroad Commissioner and former Texas Education Agency Commissioner Michael Williams.
We've seen very close races, obviously, when Beto ran a few years ago. But even after that, some of the, for example, the AG's race was very close. So some of these top of the ticket races have been close for some Democrats. And I definitely think that Colin Allred is very well positioned to break through.
A Democrat hasn't won a statewide race in Texas in 30 years, hasn't won a U.S. Senate race since 1988 when Lloyd Bentsen did so. Colin Allred presents himself as a bipartisan candidate. However, his record is very, very different from that. His record is that he's voted with Nancy Pelosi, he's voted with Harris Biden over the course of his congressional career.
One of the main central themes of Congressman Allred's campaign has been abortion rights, reproductive rights. And when you look at the polls consistently, the top concerns among Texans have been the economy and inflation and border security. Do you think this was a gamble on the congressman's part to really bank on this issue of reproductive rights and abortion rights in Texas? And I ask you that first, Lorraine.
Yeah, I don't think it's a gamble at all. I think that the fact of the matter is we are in an election and an inflection point in our country where we are very close to making a historic decision as a country. And when we bring back that to our state and here in Texas, I think there's a lot of Texas women who look at the failed leadership in Austin, realize that in many ways it has failed not just women, but children and all sorts of marginalized communities across Texas when we talk about funding for health care, funding for our public schools. And I think, frankly, Texans are tired of these failed policies, and they see a potential solution in Colin Allred.
The abortion debate is a debate that I think Texans want to have. and we want to have it, and we appreciate the fact of what the Supreme Court did in Dobbs by returning that decision to Texans. And so that's an opportunity for us to have that conversation. You know, I'm not going to say that was a risk for the congressman, because that's a legitimate, real conversation. But I do think that they're on the wrong side of that issue.
Michael Williams, Lorraine Birabil, and UT Arlington political science professor Rebecca Dean will be part of our amazing panel of experts on election night as we analyze the results coming in. Plus, we've got reporters covering a variety of key races, and our I-team is looking into any issues that may come up. We'll start at 7 o'clock when the results come in on TXA 21 and on our CBS News Texas stream. Now we'll look at another major issue we're going to be watching on election night. One of the more talked about issues this fall is in Dallas, where there are 18 ballot propositions that would change the city charter. Among them, 3 propositions, S, T, and U, that are part of the Dallas Hero Initiative, which are the most controversial. Proposition S would change the city charter to allow a Dallas resident to file a lawsuit against the city to require officials to comply with the charter and ordinances. Proposition T would allow a survey of residents to determine whether the city manager could be fired or receive a bonus. And Proposition U would require the city to increase the number of police officers to 4,000 and maintain that, among other things. We recently spoke with 3 former Dallas mayors, Laura Miller, Ron Kirk, and Tom Leppert, who are among the dozens of current and former city leaders who oppose these propositions.
Is that, frankly, they would just cripple our city's ability to be able to effectively manage itself, to do business, and pay for our basic services.
And the current city council has allocated the funding in the current budget to hire 250 new officers, to increase the salaries of the officers, to hire equipment and guns and all the things that they need to keep us safe. So this is not an issue that is being ignored.
Do we really want to be the experiment that takes and puts at risk our city and our economic future?
We also spoke with Pete Morocco, who's the executive director of the Dallas Hero Initiative, who addressed Amendment U and the police officer requirement.
How can we address this problem? And ultimately, it was decided by a group that we need to have a citizen-driven petition, because after years of trying to get some kind of sensible solution to get the city council back to just the bare minimum of 3 officers per every 1,000 citizens, exactly what we're saying, had failed. Year after year after year after year, Mike Rawlings never came up with a solution. Nobody else has come up with a solution. Enough is enough. We're putting a floor in the charter. And so that's what the people got together and said.
After Election Day, there will also be 3 new members of Congress from North Texas who will be sworn in this January, the 12th, the 26th, and 32nd congressional districts. We take a closer look at the turnout during the early vote and how it compares to 4 years ago when Eye on Politics returns. Welcome back to a special live edition of Eye on Politics, now to evaluating the early vote. The Texas Secretary of State's office says more than 8.9 million people cast their ballots early, which is nearly 48% of registered voters. Of our 4 biggest counties, only Dallas County fell below the state average, with about 45% of registered voters casting their ballots early. Fewer people voted early this year compared to the 2020 presidential election, which was during COVID. And that's because back then there were more days of early voting and more people were allowed to vote by mail. We spoke with Ross Hunt, pollster and founder of Hunt Research in Dallas on Friday.
When you take into account the number of registered voters in the state, the percentage turnout has actually fallen by about 10% relative to 2020. So at 2020, in this same point, about 53% of all Texas voters had cast a ballot early. As of the end of yesterday, it is now down at 43%.
So let's go back to something you said, that we are below 2020 through this date. And that kind of surprised me because, you know, what we heard, at least at the beginning of the early vote, that this was record turnout. And in some counties, it is high, very high turnout, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So talk to me about that.
So the early vote in person, people casting ballots in person, is very close to 2020 levels. It's at 95% of 2020 levels overall. In 2020, we just had a longer early voting period. We did 18 whole days of early voting. And we also had high levels of mail-in votes. A lot of this had to do with special provisions for COVID-19. This year, we have a shorter early voting period of just 10 days. And we aren't seeing as much high overall turnout as we had in the past. Now, some counties and areas are turning out higher than others. One of the patterns we're seeing this year is that many urban areas, urban counties are turning out at lower levels relative to 2020, whereas rural areas and towns are turning out at significantly higher levels. So, for example, if we look at Harris County has turned out at just 83% of what it had turned out at in 2020. Whereas some of the more suburban counties, say Tarrant County is at 92%, Colin and Denton at 94 and 98% of their totals. And then if you go into the truly rural areas, you see turnout that's as high as 2020 or in some cases even higher.
If you're voting on Tuesday and have questions, here are some answers from Sarah Jenkins with this week's brief.
Election day is fast approaching, and some Texas voters still have questions and concerns. Most voters are assigned a polling location based on their registered address. However, a few counties like Dallas, Tarrant, and Colin have county-wide voting centers that are not restricted to address. Other counties in Texas use a precinct-based voting system, meaning you must vote at your designated polling place according to your voter registration precinct. You can check your polling location by visiting the Secretary of State's website. You don't have to vote for every item on your ballot. A voter can select one candidate, but also does not have to choose anyone. Or a voter can vote on one proposition or amendment and leave the others blank. This is considered undervoting. Voters are entitled to undervote if they wish, and undervoting will not lead to your ballot being invalidated or disqualified. Who and what you vote for is private, but when and where you vote is public information. Texas election law mandates that voting is conducted to ensure the ballot's secrecy. That means no one should be able to determine how a voter voted.
All right, thank you so much, Sarah. Coming up next, the Texas state of mind. And now to our series of reports on the Texas state of mind. Jason Allen takes us on the road 500 miles to the south of DFW.
Welcome to the Rio Grande Valley. About 8 hours south of North Texas, this region has its own distinct flavor. If you want big city life, you won't find it this far south.
If you like fast pace, then you gotta be up there. Like, look at this right here.
The guy on the dinosaur?
Yeah, for sure. You can't drive around this at the Texas Fair or anything like that because too many people.
I've lived in the valley my whole life. So it's pretty nice. I like it down here. Why do you like it so much? The family, the culture down here, the food is amazing.
Time out. Quick fact check.
Dude. I love it. I'm gonna need so many napkins, but that's awesome. That's good stuff, man.
So people love the valley for its food, its people, its pace. But a lot of them told me the region is misunderstood.
I think that they think that the valley is kind of poor.
You don't have to go far to read a lot of things in the news about, misconceptions about the people here, the Hispanic culture.
I know they talk about immigrants, but the valley is built by immigrants. Honestly, we belong, and back in the day, we were part of Mexico.
Immigration, one of the top issues this election, and one of the most divisive. McAllen native and Texas Tribune reporter Berenice Garcia says it's nuanced, even for families who have spent generations in the region.
Some people might have family who are in Border Patrol, and they hear a lot about their experiences, and they say, well, my husband works in Border Patrol, and he'll tell me how much a wall would be very, beneficial for their work. Other people have friends who are immigrants or who are undocumented, and they see their struggle.
The community down here is so intertwined with Mexico, so it's really hard to just kind of cut it off. Yeah.
We weren't the only ones on this trip, it turns out, thinking about who's going to raise the championship belt in November.
Tacos and violent entertainment, they just go together. This is a wonderful combination I never knew existed.
I like tequila.
Yikes!
All my frustration on an election year, I do take out in the ring.
You must be super frustrated.
Listen.
Based on what I saw.
It turns out Morgan Mercy is from Dallas. But like Texans in every region, she's going to be thinking about family when she votes.
My family is my rainbow gay family. So that is whoever is like helping me and my family support themselves, that's who I back.
Among the locals, we found something interesting. People who say they aren't going to be casting a ballot for anyone in November.
Honestly, I don't vote. In 47 years, I don't vote.
You don't vote?
Nope, not once.
So you're not even one of the undecided voters. You're one of the non-voters.
Nope. No, because I learned that everybody does what they want to do. They can feed you all they want the whole election year, and at the end of the day, they still don't. It still doesn't come through.
You know, people always say that you can't complain about things if you don't vote.
Yeah, I don't. And exactly, I don't complain. I don't complain because I have no control over it.
Man, we were talking about tequila and tacos, and I was all excited. Now you've got me kind of depressed.
I'm sorry, but tequila's good.
Tequila, we need to turn to tequila.
Yeah, for sure.
That's all for Eye on Politics this week. Thanks for watching. I'm Jack Fink. I am listening, and we are listening to you at CBS News Texas. Don't forget to join us on Election Night, Tuesday, starting at 7 o'clock, when the early vote numbers are released, plus our expert panel and reporters on the big races in Texas. From all of us here, have a great weekend.